Tonight, lying here, I want to tell you the entire story of two ideas. Slowly, with nothing for you to memorize and nowhere you need to be. A little sequence of numbers, and a single proportion. And the strange, 4,000-year-long road they took, across continents and across centuries, to finally find each other. So get comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow. And let all of this just wash over you as you drift. Because here's the gentle truth about these two ideas. They are both, at their very heart, so simple that a child could understand either one in about 30 seconds. One of them is just counting. The other is just cutting a line in one particular spot. That's it. That's the entire foundation. And yet, from those two almost embarrassingly simple beginnings, human beings built something that people have called sacred, called divine, called the secret signature of the universe. And every so often, called complete nonsense. We are going to walk through all of it, gently. And tonight we begin with the second of those two ideas. The proportion, the cut, and we begin, as so many of these stories do, in ancient Greece. So let me show you the cut. And the lovely thing is, you can do this entirely in your head, lying right there with your eyes closed. Imagine a single straight line, just a line, lying flat in front of you. Now, you're going to cut it. One cut, in one place, leaving you with two pieces, a longer piece and a shorter piece. Now, you could put that cut absolutely anywhere. You could snip a tiny sliver off one end, or cut it dead in the middle into two equal halves. There are infinitely many places to put the cut, but there is exactly one cut that is special. One, and only one. In the whole length of that line, here is what makes it special. You place the cut so that the relationship between the whole line and the longer piece is exactly the same as the relationship between the longer piece and the shorter piece. The big compared to the medium should perfectly match the medium compared to the small. The same proportion, appearing twice, nested inside itself. Picture a chocolate bar for a second. You snap it into two pieces. One bigger, one smaller, for almost any place you snap it. The two pieces just feel arbitrary. But there is one magic snap point, where the way the whole bar relates to the bigger chunk is the very same ratio as the way the bigger chunk relates to the little chunk. The proportion echoes. The whole quietly contains a smaller copy of its own relationship. And when you actually sit down and work out where that one perfect cut has to fall, a number drops out, a very specific number. It comes out to roughly 1.618, and then it just keeps going. 1.618, 0, 3, 3, 9, and on it tumbles, never settling, never repeating, never resolving into a clean fraction of one whole number over another. It is in the language we'd use today. Irrational. Just sit with that for a second. The simplest possible act. Cutting one line in one spot. The kind of thing you could explain to a 5-year-old. Hides inside it a number that has no end. No. Let's travel back to meet the first people we know of who fell completely in love with this number. And I have to tell you, they are one of the strangest groups in the entire history of human thought. Picture a town called Croton, on the coast of what is now southern Italy, around 500 years before the Common Era. And in this town, there is a kind of secret brotherhood, a community of followers gathered around a man named Pythagoras. Yes, that Pythagoras, the triangle 1 from school. But the school he actually founded was far stranger and far more wonderful than anything they tell you in a geometry class. These people were not just mathematicians. They were a whole society with secret rules and peculiar taboos. They refused to eat beans. They believed you should never poke a fire with a knife. They were sworn to absolute secrecy. And at the dead center of everything they believed sat a single, almost religious conviction. They believed that number was the secret hiding underneath all of reality, that the universe, at the very bottom, was built out of whole numbers and the ratios between them. Music, the orbits of the stars, the turning of the seasons, the human soul itself. All of it, they were certain, was secretly arithmetic. And these people had a private sign, a symbol they would draw to recognize one another. The way you might catch a friend's eye across a crowded room. And that symbol was a 5-pointed star. You know the one, the star you can draw in a single unbroken stroke, without ever lifting your pen from the paper. 5 lines, 5 points, and in the very middle, where the lines all cross over one another, a small 5-sided shape. Children draw it on their notebooks. It's on flags all over the world. It is maybe the single most ordinary, most familiar shape there is. But here's the strange part, and this is the moment I genuinely love in this whole story. When you draw that star, the number shows up, uninvited. Look at any one of those crossing points. Any place where 2 of the lines slice across each other. Each line gets cut into pieces by that crossing, and the longer piece, compared to the shorter piece, is exactly that proportion, roughly 1.618, the very same magic cut, the same perfect snap point, appearing all on its own, simply because you drew a star. And it does not stop there. Remember that little 5-sided shape sitting in the heart of the star? Inside it, you can draw another star, a smaller one. And at every crossing of that smaller star, the same number is patiently waiting. And inside that one is a smaller pentagon. And inside that you can draw yet another star, smaller still, the same proportion surfacing again and again, all the way down, forever, like a hall of mirrors built out of pure geometry. Let that image just float there for a moment. A child's doodle, a 5-pointed star, and it secretly holds one single number. repeated at every joint, nested infinitely inside itself. The Pythagoreans drew this thing as a private password, and the number had been hiding inside it the whole time. Perfect, and endless, and impossible to write down. And there's a darker thread here, if you'll let me follow it for a moment, because it's far too good to leave out. Remember, these people had staked their entire view of the world on the belief that everything in existence could be written as a ratio of whole numbers. Clean, countable, comfortable numbers. But this proportion, the one hiding inside their own sacred star, cannot be written that way. It is irrational. It refuses to be pinned down as one whole number divided by another. There is no fraction anywhere that captures it exactly. And there's an old legend, mostly legend, I should say, that one of the Pythagoreans who let this unsettling truth slip, that numbers like this even exist, was drowned at sea for it. Whether that truly happened, we honestly do not know. But the legend has survived for thousands of years. And I think it survives because it holds something true. They had found something perfect and something terrifying in the very same breath. A proportion of impossible beauty that also, very quietly, broke everything they believed numbers were supposed to be. Now let's let a couple of centuries drift past and move from that secret brotherhood to a single, quiet man who did something that would go on echoing for the next 2,000 years. His name was Euclid. He lived in the great city of Alexandria, in Egypt, around 300 years before the Common Era. And here is something I find oddly moving about him. We barely know anything at all about Euclid the person. We don't really know when he was born, or where, or how he died. He is almost a ghost, and yet this ghost wrote a book so important that it was used as a mathematics textbook, more or less continuously, for over 2,000 years. Some say that, after the Bible, it may be the most printed book in history. The book is called The Elements, and somewhere inside that book, Euclid takes our proportion, the cut, and does something the Pythagoreans never quite managed. He defines it cleanly, formally. He does not call it golden, and he does not call it divine. He gives it a plain, almost bureaucratic name. He calls it dividing a line in extreme and mean ratio. That's the whole name. Extreme and mean ratio. It sounds like a phrase lifted off a tax form, but what he was describing was precisely our magic cut. Now written down with the full rigor of a proof, so that anyone, anywhere, forever afterward, could reconstruct it perfectly from scratch. And Euclid needed this cut for something very specific. He used it to build shapes, because it turns out that this one proportion is the secret key to constructing the perfect five-sided figure, the pentagon. And from the pentagon, that five-pointed star all over again. And it is also the key to building one of the most beautiful solid objects there is, a 12-sided shape, where every single face is a perfect pentagon, which pulls in, just for a moment, one more famous Greek, Plato, the philosopher, working in Athens around 400 years before the Common Era. Plato was fascinated by these perfect solid shapes, the ones where every face is identical. It turns out there are only 5 such shapes in all of existence. Just 5. And not one more. Ever. And that fact alone delighted him. And that 12-faced one, the one built entirely from pentagons, and therefore quietly soaked through with our proportion, Plato singled out as the special one. He tied the other 4 to the 4 classical elements, to earth, and air, and fire, and water. But the 12-sided one he set apart and linked, more or less, to the heavens themselves, to the cosmos, to the shape of the whole universe. So already, this early, you can feel something happening. The number that simply fell out of a plain cut in a line is gathering a kind of mystique around itself. It's in the secret sign of a mystic brotherhood, and woven into the geometry that builds the shape of the cosmos. People are beginning to feel, deep down, that it must mean something. And this is where we arrive at the famous part. The part you may well have heard before, because at some point, this proportion picked up its glamorous modern name. We call it the golden ratio, and it even got its own symbol, a single Greek letter, phi. Now here's a quieter thing that almost nobody ever hears. The ancient Greeks never once called this number golden. Not Euclid, not Pythagoras, not Plato, none of them. That warm, glowing name is barely 200 years old. It was first attached to the number by European writers back in the 1800s, and the symbol is younger still. It was chosen only in the early 1900s by a man who picked that one particular Greek letter as a small, affectionate tribute, because it happens to be the first letter in the name of a sculptor. That sculptor was Phidias. He lived in Athens, roughly between 480 and 430 years before the Common Era. And he was, by every account, the greatest sculptor of the entire ancient Greek world. He is the artist most associated with the Parthenon, the great temple standing up on the Acropolis in Athens, the one whose ruined columns you have almost certainly seen in a photograph. He carved enormous statues, including a statue of the god Zeus, so magnificent that it was counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And here is the story you have probably been told, that Phidias deliberately used the golden ratio when he designed the Parthenon, that the proportions of that temple were secretly tuned to our magic number, and that this is the real reason it looks so perfect, so balanced, so endlessly satisfying to the eye. And I have to be gentle and honest with you here, because this is the part where, if we were sitting together in the dark, I would lower my voice almost to a whisper. We have no real evidence that Phidias did any such thing. He left behind no note saying so. The man who attached the sculptor's name to the number, nearly 2,500 years later, was making a romantic guess, a lovely tribute, not reporting a documented fact. And when people lay grids over photographs of the Parthenon and announce the golden ratio is hiding inside it, You can usually only find the proportion if you choose your starting and ending lines very generously. Nudge those lines a little, and the whole thing quietly disappears. You may even have heard that this proportion is the secret reason certain everyday objects feel so pleasing to us. That the rectangle of the credit card in your pocket, or an ordinary playing card, is shaped according to the golden ratio, and that our eyes are somehow tuned deep in our nature to find that exact shape beautiful. It's a charming idea. For now, just hold it loosely. We are going to come back to it much later and look very carefully at how much of it is genuinely real and how much is simply a beautiful thing we have told ourselves until it felt like a fact. For tonight, just notice that the mystique was already quietly growing and that it has never really stopped growing since. But let's set the myths gently aside for a moment and end this first part exactly where it deserves to end, with real admiration. Because if you strip away every later legend, every romantic exaggeration, every hopeful grid laid over an old temple, something genuinely remarkable is still standing there underneath. The ancient Greeks, with no algebra worth the name, with no symbols for unknown quantities, no decimal point, no equals sign, nothing that you would recognize as the everyday machinery of modern mathematics, still reached out into the dark and grasped this proportion with their bare hands. They found the one perfect cut. They proved, with total rigor, that it could be constructed using nothing but a straight edge and a compass. They watched it bloom inside their five-pointed star, infinitely nested, and they built the very shape of the cosmos out of it. And they did all of that with their hands and their minds, and a few careful lines drawn in sand or scratched into wax. There is something deeply humbling in that. When you stop and think about how little they had to work with, and how far they still managed to see. And here is the one thing they could not possibly have known, lying there at the warm edge of the Mediterranean, so quietly proud of what they had found. They believed they had the whole of this story. They believed this proportion was theirs, a Greek treasure, a piece of pure geometry. They had no idea, none at all, that on the other side of the world, in a language they had never once heard spoken aloud, someone counting out the rhythm of poetry, one syllable at a time, had already stumbled, completely by accident, onto this number's missing other half. So let's leave the marble and the temples behind us. Let's leave the secret brotherhood and the ghost in Alexandria and the whispered story of the Parthenon, and let's travel east, all the way east, to India, to a problem that had nothing whatsoever to do with geometry and everything to do with sound. And this is the part of the story that genuinely delighted me when I first learned it, because it is so unexpected. You'd assume a sequence of numbers would come from someone doing arithmetic, from a mathematician at a desk, adding things up. But it didn't. The second of our two great ideas, the little sequence, was not born in a study full of numbers at all. It was born in poetry, in the sound of language, in people sitting with the rhythm of sacred verses, trying to count the music inside them. So picture a very different world from the marble temples of Greece. We are in ancient India now, among scholars who devoted their entire lives to the structure of poetry, not to whether a poem was beautiful, exactly, but to its architecture, its rhythm, the precise pattern of beats that made a spoken line feel the way it felt when you said it aloud. And you have to understand how much this mattered to them. A great deal of this poetry was sacred. It was chanted, recited from memory, passed down with enormous care from one generation to the next, sometimes for centuries before anyone wrote it down. The rhythm was not decoration. The rhythm was part of the meaning, part of the prayer. So these scholars studied meter the way an architect studies the forces holding up a cathedral. They wanted to know exactly which rhythms were even possible, and how many of them there were. And that simple-sounding wish, to count the possible rhythms, is what cracked the whole thing open. Here's the thing you need to know about the kind of poetry they were studying. In their language, Sanskrit, every syllable came in one of two kinds. Some syllables were short, light, quick, over almost as soon as you began them. And some syllables were long, heavy, drawn out, held for roughly twice as long as a short one. So if you wanted to, you could measure a line of poetry not by how many syllables it had, but by how many beats it took to say, a short syllable was worth one beat, a long syllable was worth 2 beats, because it lasted about twice as long. Tap it out with me for a second. Gently, in your head. One quick, soft tap for a short syllable, and one long, lengering tap, taking up the space of 2 for a long one. A line of poetry was just some arrangement of these, short and long, quick and slow, adding up to a certain total number of beats. Now, here is the question those scholars fell in love with. Suppose you fixed the length of your line. Say you want a line that is some exact number of beats long. How many different rhythms can you make that fit? How many ways can you arrange your shorts and your longs so they add up to exactly that many beats? And not one beat more or less? Let's actually count it. Slowly. Together. It's a lovely thing to watch unfold. A line that is just 1 beat long. There is only one way to make it. A single short syllable. 1 beat. 1 rhythm. So the count is 1. A line that is 2 beats long. Now you have a choice. You could use 2 short syllables, 1 beat each. Or you could use a single long syllable, which is worth 2 beats, all on its own. So that's 2 possible rhythms. The count is 2. A line 3 beats long. You could do 3 shorts in a row, or a short followed by a long, or a long followed by a short. 3 rhythms. The count is 3. A line 4 beats long. Here it opens up a little more. You could lay down 4 shorts in a row, or 2 shorts and then a long, or a short, a long, then a short, or a long and then 2 shorts. or two longs together. 2 beats and 2 beats. Count them. And there are 5 different rhythms. The count is 5. And a line 5 beats long gives you 8 ways. A line 6 beats long gives you 13. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Let those numbers just sit in the air for a moment. Because if you keep going, the next one is 21. And then 34. And then 55. And they go on climbing forever. This is the sequence. This is the famous one. The one you may have heard murmured about in connection with sunflowers and seashells and spirals. And here's where it gets quietly remarkable. These scholars weren't doing arithmetic. They weren't hunting for a magic sequence. They were doing poetry. The numbers simply fell out of the rhythm. The way a shadow falls out of a shape. And once you notice the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Look at the counts again. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Each number is exactly the sum of the 2 numbers just before it. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. The whole sequence builds itself. Each new number leaning on the 2 that came before it. And the truly beautiful part is why this happens. It is not a coincidence. And the reason is something you can actually feel. Think about a line of some fixed length. Every possible rhythm for that line has to end somehow. And there are only 2 ways it can end. It can end on a short syllable, or it can end on a long one. If it ends on a short syllable, that final short takes up just 1 beat. So everything before it is simply a rhythm for a line 1 beat shorter. And if it ends on a long syllable, that final long takes up 2 beats. So everything before it is a rhythm for a line 2 beats shorter. That is all there is. Those are the only 2 cases. So the number of rhythms for your line is just the number of rhythms for a line 1 beat shorter, plus the number for a line 2 beats shorter. The count for now is the sum of the 2 counts before it. The rule writes itself. If that still feels a little abstract, here is the very same idea in a shape you have definitely lived. Imagine a staircase. You're standing at the bottom, and you can climb it 1 step at a time, or 2 steps at a time, in any mix you like. Now ask yourself, how many different ways are there to reach a particular step? Well, the very last move you make is either a single step or a double step. If it was a single step, you must have been standing 1 stair below. If it was a double, you were 2 stairs below. So the number of ways to reach any step is the number of ways to reach the step just beneath it, plus the number of ways to reach the one beneath that. The same rule, the same sequence, hiding in a staircase. I find something deeply soothing about that the music of a poem and the climbing of a staircase are, underneath it all, the exact same little piece of counting. Now let me introduce you to the people who actually did this, because they deserve to be named. Slowly, one at a time. The earliest of them is a man called Pingala. He lived in India somewhere around the 3rd or 2nd century before the Common Era. Though I should be honest, that the exact dates are genuinely uncertain, and still argued over today. Pingala is a little like Euclid. In that respect, half a person, half a ghost. We know him almost entirely through one treatise he left behind, Adense, compact work on the rules of poetic meter. And what's remarkable about that little book is just how much it quietly contains. Inside its rules for arranging long and short syllables sit the seeds of ideas that mathematicians would not fully appreciate for a very long time, including ways of representing patterns that look, to a modern eye, a lot like the binary code that runs every computer you have ever touched. But for our story, the important thing is this. Buried inside those rules about long and short syllables is the very first seed of our sequence, written down more than 2,000 years ago, for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with what we now use these numbers for. Then, centuries later, a scholar named Virahanga. He lived somewhere between the 6th and 8th centuries of the Common Era, and he is the one who, in his own work on meter, stated the rule right out in the open, that, to count the rhythms of a given length, you add the counts of the two shorter lengths before it. The pattern, spoken plainly, on the page. After him came others, a scholar called Gopala, working around the year 1135, and then the one I most want you to remember. His name was Hemachandra. Hemachandra lived from around 1089 to 1172 in Gujarat, in Western India, and he is one of those people who makes you wonder how a single human being managed to fit so much into one lifetime. He was a Jain monk, which meant a life of enormous discipline and devotion. But he was also, by any measure, a staggering polymath. He wrote on grammar, on poetry, on philosophy, on logic, on the very meanings of words. He compiled dictionaries. He lived close to the courts of kings. An advisor and a scholar trusted near real power, and he is said to have helped guide a ruler toward a gentler, less violent way of governing, including protections for animals, which mattered to him deeply as a Jain. His admirers gave him a title that translates, more or less, to the all-knowing one of his age. Imagine carrying a nickname like that, and somewhere in that vast ocean of writing, around the year 1150, almost in passing, as a small observation about poetry, Hemachandra set the rule of our sequence down, plainly and clearly. Each number is the sum of the two before it. He did this roughly 50 years before a man in Italy, whose name this sequence would one day carry, was even born. Now here's the part history got wrong for the better part of 1,000 years. The sequence we have just watched fall out of the rhythm of Sanskrit poetry is the very same sequence that almost everyone on Earth today calls the Fibonacci numbers, named for Leonardo of Pisa, an Italian who lived centuries after Hemachandra and centuries upon centuries after Pingala. For a very long time, in the Western telling of this story, the sequence simply began with him, as though it had no past at all, as though no one had ever counted these numbers before a medieval Italian wrote about breeding rabbits And I want to be careful and fair here, because this is not a story about theft. As far as we can tell, the Italian arrived at these numbers entirely on his own, through a completely different little puzzle. He almost certainly never read Pingala, or Virahanka, or Hemachandra. This is not one person quietly taking from another. It is something stranger, and I think far more beautiful. It is the same exact pattern, discovered twice, on opposite sides of the world, centuries apart, by people who had never heard each other's names, and who were not even asking the same question. One group was slicing lines and drawing stars. The other was counting the heartbeat of a poem, and the universe handed both of them the very same numbers. So let's say the names out loud, quietly, the way they always should have been said. Pingala, Virahanka, Hemachandra. They had this sequence first, not to take a single thing away from the man in Pisa, who did something wonderful of his own, which we'll come to, but simply because it is true, and because it is only fair, and because they were there, counting syllables by lamplight. 1,000 years and more before the world decided to fasten one Italian name onto their discovery. And maybe that's the thing I would most like you to carry out of this part. As you lie there in the quiet, we tend to imagine that big ideas have owners, that somebody invents them, the way you might invent a gadget, and stamps their name on the side, and that settles it forever. But the deeper you go into the history of mathematics, the less it looks like invention, and the more it looks like discovery, as if these patterns are already out there, woven into the structure of things, simply waiting, and whoever happens to look closely enough at a line of marble or a line of poetry finds the very same thing waiting there for them. Strangers, separated by oceans and by centuries, all reaching into the same dark and pulling out the same quiet truth, never once knowing the others had done it too. And here is what none of these Indian scholars could have known. Bent over their verses, so deep in the music of their language, they had the sequence perfectly, but they never knew it was secretly tied to something far away and far older, to that one perfect cut a Greek had described 1,000 years before, to the golden proportion hiding in the pentagram, the two ideas, the sequence and the cut, were already, secretly, the very same thing, and no one on earth had yet noticed. The man who would, by pure accident, carry these numbers to Europe and hand them their famous name had not even been born yet. And here is the strange, almost funny part. When he finally did write them down, he would think they were just about the least interesting thing in his entire book. To see how this Indian counting trick ended up with an Italian name, we have to follow a merchant's son across the Mediterranean to a busy port in North Africa, where a boy was about to learn a way of writing numbers that would quietly rewire the Western world. So, let me finally introduce you to the man whose name got stuck to all of this. And I have to warn you in advance. This is one of those stories where the truth turns out to be so much stranger and honestly, so much funnier than the version most of us were handed in school. His name, in his own lifetime, was Leonardo of Pisa. He was born in that famous Italian city, the one with the leaning tower, around the year 1170. And his father was a man named Guglielmo, a Pisan merchant and customs official, the sort of man whose entire life was numbers, bills of trade, tariffs, currencies, the daily arithmetic of moving goods around the Mediterranean. And at some point in Leonardo's boyhood, his father took a posting far from home, across the sea, on the coast of North Africa, in a busy port town the Italians called Bugia. Picture it for a moment, a Mediterranean harbor, thick with traders from a dozen different lands, the air full of overlapping languages, the docks piled high with goods from across the Islamic world and beyond, and a young Italian boy, sent there to learn the family business of calculation. Suddenly surrounded by mathematicians who were doing arithmetic in a way he had simply never seen before. Because here is what was happening in that part of the world. The scholars of the Islamic world had, over the preceding centuries, absorbed and extended an extraordinary inheritance. They had taken in the mathematics of ancient Greece and the mathematics of India, and they had built something magnificent on top of it. And among the treasures they had received and polished was a way of writing numbers that had come originally from India. You already know that India is where this story keeps quietly returning. And this is the second great gift India handed the world. Sitting right there alongside our sequence, it is, in a sense, the very system of numbers you are using to think right now. The one with only 10 symbols. The one with a place for ones, and a place for tens, and a place for hundreds, where the same little symbol means something completely different depending on where it sits. And most miraculous of all, the one that includes a symbol for nothing at all, at zero. And I want to pause on the zero for just a second, because it is so easy to take for granted. And it is genuinely one of the strangest, most powerful ideas human beings ever had. A symbol that stands for nothing. Think about how odd that is. You are writing down a mark whose entire job is to say, there is nothing here. But that little nothing is what makes the whole system work. Without it, if you wanted to write a number that had some hundreds and some ones, but absolutely nothing in the tens, you were in trouble, because the empty gap in the middle could be misread, or lost, or mistaken for something else. The zero holds that empty place open. It is a faithful little nothing, standing guard over an emptiness, so that everything around it lands in exactly the right spot. And it took humanity an astonishingly long time to be comfortable with the idea of writing down nothing at all. There was a mathematician, a few centuries before Leonardo, working in the great city of Baghdad, somewhere around the years 780 to 850. His name was Al-Khwarizmi, and he wrote a book explaining this Indian way of calculating. A book that helped carry the whole system across the Islamic world eventually toward Europe. And here is a small, lovely thing, his name. When it was later written down in Latin, got worn down and mangled into a word you use constantly without ever thinking about where it came from. The word algorithm. That is literally his name, smoothed away by centuries of repetition. And another of his books gave us the word algebra. One man. 2 words you have said 100 times. I love that. Honestly, that every time someone says the word algorithm, they are unknowingly speaking the name of a scholar who sat in Baghdad more than 1,000 years ago. Now, to feel why all of this mattered. Why it was not some minor convenience, but a genuine earthquake. But you have to remember how Europeans were writing their numbers at the time. They were using Roman numerals, letters standing in for values. You have seen them on old clock faces and at the end of films marking the year. And Roman numerals are perfectly fine, more or less, for simply writing a number down. But try to actually calculate with them. 3 in your head right now. To multiply 47 by 23 using nothing but those clumsy letters. There is no neat column to line things up in. There is no sense of place. There is no 0 to hold an empty space open for ordinary, everyday arithmetic. The kind of multiplying and dividing a merchant has to do all day long. The Roman system is close to a nightmare. People leaned on physical counting boards, sliding little markers back and forth, because doing the sums on paper was so painful. And then in comes this Indian system, the one young Leonardo had learned at his father's side in North Africa. And suddenly, all of that pain just solves with 10 symbols and a 0. And the simple idea of place value. You can write any number at all, however enormous, and you can multiply it and divide it on a single sheet of paper, using simple, repeatable steps. The numbers glowing on the screen in your pocket. The way you were taught to do sums as a child. Stacking them up in columns and carrying the 1. All of it is this system. It is so completely woven into your mind that it is almost impossible to even see it as an invention. But it was one. And for medieval Europe, it changed everything. And I want you to feel this through one ordinary person, because that's really where revolutions live. Imagine a merchant in a busy Italian market town. He has just sold a shipment, and now he needs to split the profit fairly between 3 partners, after subtracting his costs, and convert what's left from one city's currency into another's. With the old letters and accounting board, this is slow, error-prone, the kind of thing that takes a specialist. With the new method, he can sit down with a pen, write it out in neat columns, and just work it through. Multiply, carry, divide. Done. A calculation that used to require an expert is now something a shopkeeper can do at his own table. That is what Leonardo was really bringing back. Not a cute puzzle about rabbits. A quiet superpower for ordinary people. So in the year 1202, back home in Italy, a grown-up Leonardo of Pisa gathered everything he had learned on his travels and poured it into a single enormous book. In Latin, it was called Liber Abaci, which means, roughly, the Book of Calculation. And this is one of the most quietly important books in the entire history of the Western world, because it is the book that taught Europe how to count the modern way. It walked merchants and scholars step by step through this strange new arithmetic, with worked examples for converting currencies, splitting profits, calculating interest, all the practical magic of trade. But here's the thing. The rabbits are the famous part, and the rabbits are the unimportant part. The real earthquake is on page 1. The thing that genuinely reshaped the world was the numeral system itself. Sitting right there at the front of the book like an ordinary instruction manual. The rabbits. The one thing we actually remember him for. Were tucked away in the middle, as just a single puzzle among hundreds of others. A little exercise, a bit of fun. So let's do the rabbits. Because even though Leonardo himself treated them as a throwaway, they really are a lovely little puzzle. And they are how most of the world first meets this sequence. Here is the question he posed. Imagine you start with a single pair of baby rabbits, one male and one female, set loose in a field, and imagine a few gentle rules, the kind that make the puzzle work even though they don't quite match real rabbits. The rabbits never die. A new pair takes 1 month to grow up, and once a pair is fully grown, they produce one new pair of babies every single month after that. Now let's just watch the field, month by month, slowly. In the first month, you have your single pair of babies. They are far too young to breed yet, so they spend the whole month simply growing up. One pair. In the second month, that pair has matured, and they have their very first pair of babies. So now there are 2 pairs, the original grown-up pair, and one tiny new pair. In the third month, the grown-up pair has yet another pair of babies, while the pair born last month is still busy growing up. So that is the old pair, plus their newest babies, plus the maturing youngsters. 3 pairs. And here is where, if you have been quietly counting along with me, you might begin to feel the rhythm of the thing arriving before I even say it. Because in the 4th month, every pair old enough to breed has babies while the youngest pairs grow up. And you land on 5 pairs. And then, the month after that, 8. And then 13. And then 21. 1. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Do you recognize those? You should. They are exactly, precisely, the very same numbers we watched fall out of the rhythm of Sanskrit poetry. An entire ocean and several centuries away. The breeding rabbits of an Italian merchant and the chanted meters of Indian poets are humming the exact same tune. Each new month's count is the sum of the 2 months before it, for the very same underlying reason a poem's rhythms were. And by the end of a single year, that one original pair has quietly multiplied into hundreds. And now we arrive at the part of this that I find genuinely, quietly hilarious. Because out of everything in that giant book, all the careful lessons that truly transformed European commerce and science and daily life, the single thing the world decided to remember Leonardo for is the rabbits, the footnote, the party trick. We took his throwaway puzzle and made it his monument. And we mostly forgot the real revolution he was actually handing us. And here's the small, almost funny tragedy of it. He did not name the sequence. He did not think it was important. He had absolutely no idea it was secretly connected to anything deep. To him, it was a charming scrap of arithmetic. Nothing more. And he moved straight on to the next puzzle on the list. And it goes one layer deeper still. Because even the name is not really his. In his own lifetime, nobody on earth called him Fibonacci. He was Leonardo Pisano. Leonardo the Pisan. Leonardo the Traveler. The name Fibonacci is a kind of nickname, a squashing together of words that mean more or less, son of the Bonacci family. And it did not become attached to him in any common way until centuries after he was dead and buried. When later writers reached back through time, picked him out, and pinned that name onto both the man and the numbers. So, the sequence the whole world now calls Fibonacci was named Fibonacci by people he never met, long after he could possibly object, for a puzzle he was certain barely mattered. The man who actually fastened that name to the sequence, in the way we all use it today, came along much later. A French mathematician named Édouard Lucas, who lived from 1842 to 1891. Lucas adored these numbers. He studied them deeply. He extended them into new patterns of his own. And he is the reason we say the Fibonacci sequence at all. And Lucas himself has one of the strangest exits in the entire history of mathematics, which I simply cannot resist telling you. He was at a banquet, a formal dinner, when a waiter dropped a stack of plates. A single shard of broken crockery flew up and cut him, just slightly, on the cheek. It seemed like nothing at all, a tiny accident at dinner, but the little wound became infected. And within days, the man who gave the Fibonacci sequence its name was dead, killed, in effect, by a dropped plate. History, as I keep gently saying, has a very peculiar sense of humor. And maybe that is the quiet joke sitting underneath this whole part of the story. History is a careless, generous, faintly absurd thing. It attached a Greek sculptor's name to a number he almost certainly never wrote down. It attached an Italian merchant's nickname to a sequence that Indian poets had discovered centuries before him. It remembered the rabbits and forgot the revolution. It mislabels glory. And it mislabels people. And then it just shrugs and wanders on. And yet, somehow, through all of it, the beautiful thing itself survives. The sequence is still here, still perfect, still climbing. And whatever name we happen to have stuck onto it, it does not care in the slightest. because it was never really ours to name in the first place. We only ever keep finding it. But there is one more accident still waiting in this story. And it is the most wonderful one of them all, because here is something that almost no one ever realizes. For nearly 400 years after Leonardo wrote his book, the sequence and the golden ratio are two great ideas, sat side by side in the very same world, in the same libraries, sometimes inside the very same books, the cut from Greece resting on one shelf, the sequence from India on the next. And not a single living soul on earth had noticed that they were, secretly, two halves of one single thing, until one night, late, a brilliant, troubled, half-bankrupt astronomer, a man who spent his life staring at the orbits of the planets and straining to hear the music he was certain was hidden in the heavens, did something very simple. He took one of these numbers from the sequence, and he divided it by the number just before it. And in that small, ordinary little division, he saw something that made him feel the floor shift beneath his feet. That astronomer of us, Johannes Kepler. And to understand what he saw that night, we are going to do something that, in 4,000 years, no one had ever quite managed to do before. We are going to bring our two ideas, the sequence from India and the cut from Greece, into the same room. At the same time, for the very first time. So here we are, the moment I have genuinely been looking forward to ever since we started, because we are about to take the two ideas we have been carrying all this way, one in each hand, and finally hold them up against each other. In your left hand, the cut, the proportion from ancient Greece, the single most perfect way to divide a line, the number that hides inside the pentagram, roughly 1.618. Irrational, endless, impossible to write down as a clean fraction. And in your right hand, the sequence, the little ladder of whole numbers from India. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Each one the simple sum of the two before it. Tiddy, countable, perfectly rational. And for more than 2,000 years, nobody, not Euclid, not Pingala, not the scholars of Baghdad, not Leonardo of Pisa, not one single human being had ever noticed that these two things had the faintest thing to do with each other. And why would they? One is a line drawn in marble. The other is a list of rabbits. They lived in completely different rooms of the human mind. Tonight, we are going to open the door between those rooms. But before we get to the man who first saw it, the astronomer Kepler, we have to make one short stop in the Italian Renaissance, because this is where our proportion picked up the most dramatic of all its many names. Around the year 1500, there was a Franciscan friar named Luca Pacioli. He lived from 1445 to 1517. And he is one of those quietly enormous figures that most people have never heard of. Among other things, Pacioli more or less wrote the book on double-entry bookkeeping, the accounting method that still runs the entire financial world to this day. Every ledger, every balance sheet, every business that tracks what it owns against what it owes, traces back to this friar. So the next time accounting strikes you as dull, remember that it was codified by a Renaissance monk who also wrote a glowing, mystical treatise about a divine number. Because that is the other thing Pacioli did. In the year 1509, he published a book with a title that tells you precisely how he felt about our proportion. He called it De Divina Proportione, on the divine proportion, to Pacioli and to the thinkers of his age. This number was not merely elegant, it was holy. They looked at its strange behavior and saw in it a reflection of God himself, the way it can never be written as a simple fraction, the way it seems to be one single thing and yet folds its own relationships inside itself. All of this felt, to them, like a fingerprint left by the divine. And here is a detail you have almost certainly heard before, though it is usually told the wrong way around. That book, on the divine proportion, was illustrated beautifully by a friend of Pacioli's, a man named Leonardo da Vinci. Now, you have very likely been told, at some point in your life, that Leonardo da Vinci built the golden ratio into the Mona Lisa, into the Vitruvian Man, into all his great works, that he used it as a kind of secret key to beauty. And I have to be honest with you here, gently, the same way I was about the Parthenon. There is no solid evidence that he did any such thing. What we actually know, what is genuinely documented, is something far more modest, and I think far more charming. Leonardo drew the pictures for his friend's book about the proportion, careful, gorgeous drawings of geometric solids. He was the illustrator, the artist brought in to make the mathematics beautiful on the page. That is his real, provable connection to this number, not a hidden formula buried in his paintings, a commission from a friar. And still, even now, with the proportion famous and divine and drawn by the greatest artist alive, nobody had connected it to the sequence. The two ideas were sitting in the same century, sometimes the very same city, and they were still complete strangers, which brings us, at last, to the man standing at the door, Johannes Kepler. Kepler lived from 1571 to 1630 in what is now Germany. And his life was, frankly, a hard one. He was often poor. He buried several of his own children. His mother was put on trial as a witch. And Kepler spent years of his life defending her, writing arguments to keep her from being burned alive. This was a man who knew real darkness, and yet he spent his days reaching for the most luminous thing he could imagine. He was an astronomer, one of the greatest who has ever lived. The man who finally worked out that the planets travel around the sun not in tidy circles, but in stretched ovals, in ellipses. But underneath all the rigorous science, Kepler was, at heart, a mystic. He was convinced, deep in his bones, that the whole universe was built upon a hidden musical harmony, a divine geometry, and that if only he listened hard enough, he might actually hear it. So of course it was Kepler. Of course it was the man straining his whole life to hear the music of the heavens who finally noticed the thing that nobody else had. He was turning the Fibonacci sequence over in his hands. These plain, tidy whole numbers. And he did something almost childishly simple. He began dividing each number by the one just before it, and he watched, very closely, what came out. Let's do it with him, slowly, and just listen to where the numbers go. 1 divided by 1, that is 1. 2 divided by 1, that is 2. 3 divided by 2, that is 1.5. 5 divided by 3, that is about 1.667. 8 divided by 5, that is exactly 1.6. 13 divided by 8, that is 1.625. 21 divided by 13, that is about 1.615. 34 divided by 21, that is about 1.619. 55 divided by 34, that is about 1.6176. Do you hear it? Do you hear what is happening? The answers are bouncing. 1, then 2, then back down to 1.5, then up past 1.6, then a little under, then a little over, then a little under once more, like someone walking toward a wall in the dark, reaching out a hand, overshooting, pulling back, overshooting a little less, pulling back a little less, and the wall they are walking toward, the exact value they are closing in on, nearer and nearer with every single step, yet never quite landing on it, is 1.618, the golden ratio, the cut, Euclid's perfect proportion. Let that arrive. For a second, the sequence of plain whole numbers from India, the rabbit puzzle, the chanted poems. When you simply divide each number by the one before it, the answers walk, step by patient step, straight toward the irrational proportion of ancient Greece, the number hiding in the pentagram, the divine proportion. They are the same thing. They were always the same thing. And here is where the whole story clicks quietly into place. These two ideas, the sequence and the proportion, the ones we have been chasing down two separate roads, across two separate continents, for 2,000 long years, were never two stories at all. They were always one. But the most beautiful question is still hanging there in the air. Why? Why on earth should dividing a string of rabbit numbers march you toward a 2,000-year-old Greek line? This cannot just be luck, and it isn't. The reason is one of the most elegant things in all of mathematics. And I am going to take it very, very slowly, because it is worth it. And because it might just be the most soothing little piece of arithmetic you will hear all night. It begins with one strange property of phi, our golden number. Phi has a habit that almost no other number has. Phi is equal to 1, plus 1 divided by phi itself. Read that again. Slowly. In your mind. The number contains a small copy of itself, tucked away inside its own definition. And once you know that, you can do something almost hypnotic with it, because anywhere you see phi, you are allowed to replace it with that whole phrase. 1 plus 1 divided by phi. So let's just keep doing exactly that. Over and over. Phi is 1 plus 1 divided by phi. But that phi at the end is also 1 plus 1 divided by phi. So phi becomes 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 1 divided by phi. And that phi, 2, is 1 plus 1 divided by phi. So down we go again. 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 1 divided by phi. And we can keep going forever. What we are left with, in the end, is an endless tower. 1 plus 1 over 1 plus 1 over 1 plus 1 over 1 plus 1 over 1, sinking down and down and down, with nothing in it anywhere, on any floor, but the number 1 and the quiet act of dividing. The simplest possible ingredients, the simplest possible recipe, just the number 1, whispered over and over, forever. And out of that very simplest of all recipes falls the golden ratio. Let that mantra run for a moment. 1 plus 1 over 1 plus 1 over 1, softly down into the dark. And now here is the payoff, the thing that ties the whole knot together. If you build that endless tower of ones, but you stop early, just a few floors down, and you actually work out the fraction you have so far, do you know what you find? You get 1 over 1, then 2 over 1, then 3 over 2, then 5 over 3, then 8 over 5. The Fibonacci ratios. The exact same ladder Kepler was climbing a moment ago. The Fibonacci fractions are simply this infinite tower of phi, caught partway down. That is the deep reason they march toward phi. They were always little pieces of phi, the whole time. Now here is what makes phi genuinely strange. And this is going to matter enormously. Very soon, that endless recipe, the one made of nothing but ones, turns out to be the worst possible recipe for ever pinning a number down with a neat little fraction. There is a hidden rule at work here. The bigger the numbers tucked inside a number's secret recipe, the faster a simple fraction can sneak up and land close to it. Take pi. Pi has some surprisingly big numbers buried in its recipe early on, which is the whole reason a humble fraction, like 22 divided by 7, gets you so unexpectedly close to pi. But phi's recipe holds the smallest numbers it could possibly contain. Nothing but ones. The entire way down. There are no big jumps in it. No shortcuts. no spot where a tidy fraction can leap in and get close. So phi holds the whole world at arm's length. It resists, and in a precise, provabler, mathematical sense. Phi is the single hardest number in all of mathematics to approximate with a fraction, the most stubborn number there is. People sometimes call it, with real affection, the most irrational number of all. And that, believe it or not, is exactly why it is about to show up inside a sunflower. There is one last piece of magic I want to show you before we go outside, and it runs the whole thing in reverse. And it is so strange it almost feels like a sleight of hand. We have seen that the sequence reaches out toward the irrational number phi, but the relationship also runs the other way. There exists a single formula, a clean little machine, that can hand you any number in the Fibonacci sequence directly. You do not have to climb the whole ladder, adding one rung at a time. You can simply ask it for the 50th number, or the 100th, and the machine just gives it to you, all at once. And here is the part that should stop you where you lie. Look inside that machine. And what is it built out of? It is built entirely out of irrational numbers. It is made of phi, that endless, unwritable proportion. And it is made of the square root of 5, another number that runs on forever and never once repeats. The whole formula is constructed out of these wild, infinite, untidy ingredients. And yet, every single time you feed it a plain whole number, it hands you back a perfect whole number. You ask it for the 10th Fibonacci number, and out comes 55. Exactly, without a speck of decimal trailing behind it. You ask for the 20th, and out tumbles a clean whole number in the thousands, right on the nose. The infinite parts, the endless messy tales of those irrational numbers, somehow always cancel each other out perfectly, leaving behind something flawless and whole. It is a machine that drinks in the infinite and pours out the tidy. It is called Binet's formula, after a French mathematician named Jacques Binet, who wrote about it in the 1840s. Although, and by now this truly will not surprise you in the slightest, Binet was not actually the first to find it. Mathematicians like de Moivre and the great Euler had it well before him. History, one more time, knocked on the wrong door and handed out the name. But the magic of the thing belongs to no one in particular. An equation made of numbers that never end, quietly manufacturing the simplest whole numbers there are. And maybe this is the strangest, most wonderful knot in the entire story. The one I keep turning over in my own mind late at night. On one side, we have the most irrational number in all of existence. A number so resistant to being captured that it is, provably, the hardest of all to approximate, the very opposite of tidy. And on the other side, we have the Fibonacci numbers, the cleanest, simplest, most perfectly whole little ladder you could ever imagine. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And these two things, the most untidy number there is and the tidiest sequence there is, are not opponents. They are not even strangers. They are two faces of one single thing, the wildest, most uncapturable proportion in all of mathematics turns out to be the secret engine quietly driving the most orderly little sequence of counting numbers in the world. And I honestly do not think anyone fully understands why that should feel as beautiful as it does. It simply does. You can prove every single step of it. Follow the logic all the way down. And it still leaves behind a kind of warm, pleasant mystery, like a door left standing slightly open. Sit in that for a moment, the most irrational thing there is, quietly running the most rational thing there is, 2,000 years of separation, dissolved into one idea. And it would be so easy to stop right here and to call all of this a beautiful coincidence, a lovely accident of mathematics, a number that just happens to link a rabbit puzzle to a Greek line, tucked away in dusty old books and clever formulas, a curiosity for monks and astronomers. But here is the thing that still astonishes me the most. And it is not written in any book of mathematics at all. It is not in Euclid. It is not in the book of calculation. It is not in Kepler's notebooks. It is alive. It is happening. Right now. Tonight, while you lie there in the dark, it is growing. In the center of a flower, in the heavy head of a sunflower turning slowly toward the light, packing its thousands of seeds into the one perfect pattern that a number called the most irrational makes utterly, beautifully inevitable. To see why a sunflower, of all the things in this world, should care about the most irrational number in all of mathematics. We have to leave the libraries and the cathedrals behind us. We have to put down the books, and we have to go outside, into the quiet, relentless, patient geometry of things that grow. So, let's step outside. Leave the candlelit libraries behind. Leave the friars and the astronomers and their dusty old books, and just walk out into a garden. It's quiet out here. Maybe it's late summer, and in front of you, standing taller than you are, is a single enormous sunflower, its great heavy head bowed slightly, still following the memory of the sun. I want you to look in your mind's eye, right into the center of it, not at the bright yellow petals around the rim, but at the dense, packed face in the middle, where all the seeds are, hundreds of them, thousands, in a big one, crowded together into this rich brown spiral mosaic. It looks, at first glance, like beautiful chaos. But it is not chaos at all. It is one of the most precise pieces of geometry in the entire natural world, and the number running through it, quietly, invisibly, is the very same number we have been chasing now for 4,000 years. Here is what is actually happening in that sunflower's face. And I would love for you to picture it slowly, because it really is lovely. The seeds are arranged in spirals, and not just one set of spirals. there are two sets, woven into each other. One set curves gently clockwise. The other set curves the opposite way, counterclockwise. They overlap, like two combs laid across one another. And that is what gives the center its shimmering, woven look. Now, here is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up. Just a little. If you were to sit there, patiently, and count the number of spirals turning clockwise, and then count the number turning counterclockwise, you would not get two random numbers. You would get two numbers sitting right next to each other in our sequence. On a typical sunflower, you might count 34 spirals going one way and 55 going the other. On a bigger one, 55 and 89. On a truly giant head, 89 and 144. Always two Fibonacci numbers, always next-door neighbors on the ladder. And it is not only sunflowers. Pick up a pine cone and look at the base of it, where the little woody scales spiral around. Count the spirals one way, then the other, and you will tend to find 8 and 13. Look closely at the skin of a pineapple, those diamond-shaped segments, and you can trace 3 different families of spirals winding around it, and they come in 5s and 8s and 13s, the very same numbers, over and over, in the seed head, in the cone, in the fruit, as if every growing thing were quietly counting in the same hidden language. So the obvious question is, how? How does a flower with no brain, no ruler, no idea that mathematics even exists, end up building something this exact? And the answer turns out to be so simple and so beautiful that it took some of the cleverest people in the world a surprisingly long time to see it. It all comes down to a single angle. Here is the rule the plant follows, more or less. As it grows, it builds its seeds one at a time, from the center outward, and each new seed is set down at a fixed turn around the center from the one before it. A little rotation, then a new seed, the same rotation again. Then another seed, around, and around, and around. And the exact size of that turn is the whole secret. The angle the plant uses is almost precisely 137.5 degrees. No, a full circle, all the way around and back to the start, is 360 degrees. And this particular turn, this 137.5, is not just any old angle. It is what we call the golden angle. It is exactly what you get when you carve up a full circle using, of all things, our golden ratio. The most irrational number in all of mathematics, the stubborn one from the last part, the one that resists every fraction you throw at it. It has come outside with us, into the garden. And here is why that matters so enormously. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you are filling a great circular theater with seats. And the only rule you are allowed is this: turn a fixed angle, place a seat. turn the same angle again. Place another seed. Now, suppose the angle you happen to choose was exactly half a turn. What would happen? Your second seed lands directly across from the first. Your third seed lands right back on top of the first. You would only ever fill two thin spokes. Two straight lines reaching across the room, and waste the entire rest of the theater. Suppose instead you chose a third of a turn. Now you get 3 spokes, a sampler fraction, like 2/5 of a turn, gives you 5 spokes. Any neat, tidy fraction of a circle eventually closes up into a set of straight spokes, with great, empty, wasteful gaps lying between them. But the golden angle is built from the one number that can never, ever be written cleanly as a fraction, so it never closes up. It never forms spokes. Every single new seed, turned by that stubborn angle, lands in the largest gap still remaining, the one spot with the most elbow room left in the whole flower. And the next seed fills the next biggest gap, and the next one after that. The seeds never line up into wasteful rows, because the angle they are all following refuses, mathematically refuses, to ever fold back into a neat, repeating pattern, and the result is the tightest, most efficient packing of seeds that is geometrically possible, nothing wasted. Every last scrap of space in that flower's face used. It is the very same instinct as stacking oranges to fit the most you can into a crate, or squeezing the most cars into a small parking lot. The flower has, without knowing a thing about it, solved a genuinely hard packing problem perfectly. And here is the thing the plant absolutely does not know it is doing. It is not measuring anything. It has no idea what an angle even is. It is simply following one small chemical rule, each new bud forming in the emptiest spot available to it. Over and over and over again. And the most irrational number in mathematics quietly does all the rest. It was, rather fittingly, our friend Kepler who first guessed, centuries ago, that plants might be growing according to this very sequence. He did not have the full picture, but that mystic's intuition of his pointed him right at it. And much more recently, back in 1970, a scientist showed just how little a plant actually needs to do. He built a tiny mathematical model where you simply place one dot, then another, each one turned by the golden angle and nudged a little further out from the center, and nothing else at all. No grand design, no blueprint, just that one repeated step, and what blooms out of it, right there on the page, is a perfect sunflower, spirals and all. The Fibonacci numbers appear entirely on their own, completely uninvited, exactly as they do in the living flower. One rule, one irrational angle, and the whole beautiful structure simply falls out of it. Now, I have been telling you about the real magic, and it is real. The spirals in that sunflower are genuinely there, genuinely countable, and genuinely caused by this number. We can explain every single step of it. But here is where I have to be honest with you. Gently. Because I truly think the truth is better than the legend. A great deal of what you have been told about this number over the years is, to put it as kindly as I can, made up. You have probably heard, for instance, that the spiral of a nautilus shell, that gorgeous chambered seashell you have seen in 100 photographs, is a perfect golden spiral. It is one of the most repeated claims about this number anywhere on Earth. And it is. I am a little sorry to tell you. Not true. The nautilus does grow in a spiral. A beautiful one. What is called a logarithmic spiral, which simply means a spiral that keeps the exact same shape as it grows. Widening steadily outward, but never changing its proportions. That part is completely real, but the rate at which it widens is not the golden ratio. It is gentler than that. And it varies quite a bit from one shell to the next. The nautilus is a stunning spiral. It is just not this spiral. Someone, somewhere, badly wanted it to be. And the lovely story stuck. And it is the same with a whole long shelf of famous claims. We already talked, right at the very beginning, about the Parthenon, and how the golden rectangles people find in it only ever appear if you choose your lines very generously. The same turns out to be true of the popular idea that beautiful human faces are secretly built upon this proportion, that there is a golden mask of perfect beauty you could lay over a face. When people actually go and test these claims carefully, the magic number tends to quietly melt away. You can find roughly 1.6 in almost anything at all, if you are allowed to pick where you start measuring and where you decide to stop. A great deal of this romantic overclaiming traces back to one earnest, passionate man, a German thinker named Adolf Zeising, who lived from 1810 to 1876. In the middle of the 1800s, Zeising became utterly convinced that this proportion was nothing less than a universal law of beauty, a secret rule hiding behind the human body, behind art, behind architecture, behind music, behind the growth of plants, behind, well, more or less everything, and I do not want to be hard on him for it. Because honestly, I understand the feeling completely. He had fallen in love with a genuinely beautiful idea. And once you fall in love like that, you start to see your beloved absolutely everywhere you look. That is a very human thing to do. But love, however sincere, is not evidence. And Zeising saw the golden ratio in a great many places where, if you measure carefully and honestly, it simply isn't. The modern version of Zeising is the way people lay golden spirals and golden grids over photographs, over company logos, over famous old paintings, over celebrities' faces, and announce, look, there it is, the hidden secret of beauty. And it works as an idea precisely because the number is so forgiving. Drape a loose enough spiral over a busy enough image, and your eye will helpfully connect it to something or other. It is a little like an Instagram filter for the imagination. It does not actually reveal some hidden truth waiting inside the picture. It just paints one on, over the top. And here is the thing I most want you to carry away from all of this. And it is the very opposite of disappointing. Throwing out the fake magic does not leave us with less. It leaves us with more. Because look at what we are still holding in our hands. On one side, a pile of pretty stories that people pasted onto seashells and temples and faces. Stories that dissolve the very moment you take out a ruler and measure them. And on the other side, the sunflower, which is real, which we can count with our own eyes, which we can explain, all the way down, from the chemistry of a single growing bud to the most irrational number in all of mathematics. The flower is not a story that someone told. The flower is simply true. And that, to me, is so much more beautiful than the myth ever was. A made-up pattern traced over a painting tells you only that human beings are wonderfully good at seeing faces in the clouds. But a real pattern, alive in a flower. One you can count with your own eyes and explain with real mathematics. Tells you something genuine about how the living world is actually put together. The myths were us, projecting ourselves outward. The flower is the universe, quietly doing the thing all on its own. And I would trade 1,000 romantic legends, happily, for that one real sunflower. And maybe the most peaceful thought in all of this is the one about the flower itself, because the sunflower does not know a single thing we have just discussed. It has never heard of Euclid, or of Fibonacci, or of Kepler. It cannot count its own spirals. It has no concept of an angle, no notion of a ratio, no idea whatsoever that mathematics even exists. It is just a plant, growing quietly in the dark soil, doing the one simple thing its nature tells it to do. Bud after bud, turn after turn. And yet the deepest number in all of mathematics blooms out of it anyway, perfectly, every single time. The flower does not understand the law. It simply lives it. And there is something in that. I think that is deeply comforting. You do not have to understand the rule that shapes you in order to be shaped. Beautifully. By it, the sunflower trusts the turning, and the turning takes care of everything else. So, we have thrown out the fake magic, and we have held on to the real magic, and we are left with something solid, and countable, and true. Flowers, pinicornes, pineapples, the quiet arithmetic of growing things. And you would think, surely, that this is where the story finally settles down for good. That this number belongs to gardens and seashells, to plants and to the soft, living world, and to nowhere else at all. But in the year 1982, a scientist was standing in a laboratory, firing a beam of electrons at a small, ordinary-looking piece of metal, and watching the pattern that bounced back. And in that pattern, frozen deep inside solid, lifeless matter, he saw this exact number staring straight back out at him. a number that, according to everything science thought it knew at the time, had absolutely no business being there. So he checked it, and he checked it again. And when he finally told the world what he had found, one of the most famous chemists alive looked him in the eye and told him that he was, quite simply, wrong. That scientist's name was Dan Shechtman, and what he found, and what it would cost him to make the world finally believe it, takes our number out of the garden altogether and carries it into the strange and beautiful frontier where mathematics and the physical world quietly stop being two separate things at all. So let's pick up exactly where we left off. A scientist in a laboratory in the year 1982, staring at a pattern that the rules of science said simply could not exist. To understand why it shook him so badly, and why it would take the world the better part of 30 years to believe him, we have to rewind just a little to a few years earlier, and to something that looks, at first, almost like a joke. A man playing with tiles on a floor. That man was Roger Penrose, an English mathematician and physicist, born in 1931. One of the most brilliant minds of the last century. And in 1974, Penrose got curious about a deceptively simple question. We all know you can tile a floor with shapes that repeat. Square tiles, like a checkerboard, hexagon, like a honeycomb. The pattern just marches off in every direction, copying itself over and over, perfectly regular. That is how nearly every tiled floor you have ever stood on actually works. But Penrose asked a stranger question. Could you tile a floor completely, leaving no gaps at all, using shapes that never, ever settle into a repeating pattern? A floor you could walk across forever, and never once find the same arrangement twice? And what he found is genuinely beautiful. He discovered that with just two simple tile shapes, two little four-sided pieces, you could cover an entire endless floor perfectly, with no gaps and no overlaps. And yet the pattern would never repeat. Walk a mile across that floor, walk 1,000 miles, and you would never find a patch that was an exact copy of a patch you had seen before. It is ordered. It is not random. There are rules. There is structure. There is a deep hidden logic running through all of it. But it never, ever repeats. Mathematicians call this aperiodic, which is really just a long word for never settling into a repeating loop. And here is the part I love. When you look closely at how those two tiles fit together, what comes spilling out of the pattern, over and over again, is five-fold symmetry. The symmetry of a five-pointed star. The symmetry of the pentagram, which, if you remember all the way back to the very beginning of this story, is exactly where we first met our number, scratched out in secret by the Pythagoreans, and sure enough, woven all the way through the Penrose tiling. In the relationship between the two tile shapes, in how often each one appears, is our golden ratio, the most irrational number, the one that never repeats. sitting right at the heart of a pattern that never repeats. Of course it is. The two of them were made for each other. And for a few years, that is all this was. A gorgeous mathematical curiosity. A pattern that could, in principle, tile a never-repeating floor. Lovely, clever, and, as far as anyone knew, with nothing in the real world that actually looked like it. Just a beautiful idea, waiting quietly on a shelf. And then came Dan Shechtman, an Israeli materials scientist, born in 1941, who in the spring of 1982 was working at a research lab in America, melting metals together and freezing them very fast to see what structures they would form. One day, he was studying an alloy of aluminium and manganese, firing a beam of electrons through it and looking at the pattern of bright dots that bounced back. Because that pattern of dots is, in effect, a fingerprint. It tells you exactly how the atoms inside the metal are arranged. And the fingerprint he saw should not have been possible. He saw 10 bright dots, arranged in a perfect ring, a clean, sharp, five-fold symmetry, the symmetry of a star, the symmetry of the Penrose tiling in his notebook. That very day, he simply wrote the number 10, followed by 3 question marks. Because here is the thing that every crystal scientist on Earth knew the way they knew their own name. The atoms in a solid crystal arrange themselves in patterns that repeat, and a repeating pattern, by the iron laws of geometry. Simply cannot have five-fold symmetry. You cannot tile a floor with regular pentagons. They leave gaps. It was considered flatly impossible, a law of nature, and Shechtman was looking, with his own 2 eyes, straight at the impossible. He was looking at a piece of solid metal whose atoms were arranged in an ordered pattern, with the symmetry of a star that never repeated. He was looking at a Penrose tiling, not on paper, not as a clever idea on a shelf, built, atom by atom, inside a real piece of metal. He had found a kind of matter that nobody on Earth believed could exist. We call it, today, a quasicrystal, ordered, but never repeating, and folded into its very structure, quietly holding the whole impossible thing together, was the golden ratio. Now, you might think a discovery like that would make a person instantly famous. It did very nearly the opposite. And here is the thing about being right too early. It can look, from the outside, exactly like being wrong. For almost a decade, Dan Shechtman was treated as a crank. When he showed his results to the people around him, they did not see a breakthrough. They saw a mistake. They told him to go back and read the textbook again. The head of his research group reportedly handed him that very textbook and suggested he reread it. And eventually, he was asked to leave the group altogether, because his impossible claim was, they felt, an embarrassment to all of them. He spent years being quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, laughed at. And the loudest of all the doubters was not some minor figure. It was Linus Pauling, And I do want to be fair to Pauling here, because he was a true giant, one of the greatest chemists who has ever lived, a man who won 2 Nobel Prizes entirely on his own. When someone of that towering stature tells you that you are wrong, the entire world leans in and listens. And Pauling was absolutely certain that quasicrystals were nonsense, that Shechtman had simply misread ordinary crystals stuck together in some confusing way. He said it again and again, in public, in that great booming voice of authority. He is remembered for one particular line he used to wave the whole idea away. There are no quasicrystals, he said. Only quasi-scientists. Just sit with that for a second. One of the most celebrated scientists on the entire planet, standing up in public and as good as calling you a fraud. Most people would have folded. Shechtman did not fold. He knew what he had seen. He checked it, and he rechecked it, and he held his ground. Quietly, stubbornly, for years, and slowly, the world came around to him, because that is the one thing that science, for all its flaws, is built to do in the end. Other researchers began to find quasicrystals too. Then they learned how to grow them on purpose. The mathematics of Penrose's strange tiling fit them perfectly. Like a key in a lock, the evidence piled up and piled up until it simply could not be waved away any longer. In the early 1990s, the official scientific definition of the word crystal itself was quietly rewritten to make room for these ordered, never-repeating structures that nearly everyone had sworn were impossible. And then, in the year 2011, Dan Shechtman was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, not shared with anyone, alone, for the discovery of quasicrystals. The man who had been told to go and reread the textbook had, instead, rewritten it. The man who had been called a quasi-scientist stood up and accepted the highest honor his entire field can give. And Linus Pauling, who had been so certain, and so loud, and so wrong, had died years earlier, in 1994. Never living to see the atoms themselves prove him mistaken. There is a deep, quiet justice in that. I think the universe had been keeping our number folded up inside solid matter all along, and it simply waited, patiently, the way it always seems to, for someone stubborn enough to see it, and brave enough to keep saying so out loud. And here is where our number finally stops being only a story about the past, and quietly becomes part of the machinery of the present. Because that same golden ratio, that same Fibonacci sequence, turns up now in the most modern places you could imagine. Deep inside computer science, there are clever methods that use the golden ratio to spread information out as evenly as it can possibly be spread. And the reason is exactly the same reason the sunflower used it. Because it is the most irrational number. It is the very best at avoiding clumps. The best at making sure nothing piles up in the same spot twice. The flower's trick for packing its seeds is underneath. The same trick a computer uses for organizing its data. But I would not be honest with you if I did not also gently point at the other side of this, because the golden ratio also shows up today in places where it is doing far less than people claim. In the world of finance, for example, you will find traders drawing lines across their price charts at levels supposedly ruled by the golden ratio, convinced that the market itself somehow bends toward this number. And the honest, careful answer is that there is very little solid evidence the market does any such thing. It is, in truth, much closer to the Parthenon, or to the beautiful face, than it is to the sunflower. It is people reaching for a pattern in something noisy and uncertain, and finding the comfort of one, whether or not it is truly there. And here is the strange twist. Sometimes, if enough people believe in a line on a chart, their shared belief alone can nudge the price toward it for a little while, which is its own kind of fascinating. But that is not the universe speaking. That is only us. And maybe this is the right moment, here, near the very end, to look back along the whole strange road we have walked together tonight, because when you lay it all out, end to end, it really is something to behold. A number, hiding inside a line, cut in one particular place, the same number, found by poets in India, counting the long and short beats of their sacred verses. Centuries before anyone in Europe had heard of it, the same number, drawn in secret by a brotherhood in ancient Greece, in the crossing lines of a 5-pointed star. The same number, carried west by a merchant's son in Pisa, tucked inside a little puzzle about breeding rabbits that he thought barely mattered at all. The same number, spotted by a poor, grieving astronomer in Prague, who divided one of those rabbit numbers by the one before it, and felt the floor shift beneath him. The same number, called divine by a Renaissance friar, and drawn by the greatest artist who ever lived. The same number, blooming in silence in the face of a sunflower turning slowly toward the light. And the same number, at the very last, frozen deep inside a piece of metal, in the impossible architecture of an atom. One number, 4,000 years, a put, a mystic, a Mercian, an astronomer, a flower, an atom, all of them, without ever once meeting, without ever knowing the others existed, holding up the very same quiet thing to the light. But here is the question I want to leave you with, somewhere on the soft edge of sleep, because woven all the way through this story, from the very first part to this last one, there have quietly been two different things happening, and they can look almost identical, and learning to tell them apart might just be the most important skill there is. On one side, there is finding a pattern, the spirals in the sunflower, the atoms in the quasicrystal, the numbers in the poem. These are real. They are there whether or not a single human being ever notices them. We did not put them there. We found them. The way you find a river or a star. And on the other side, there is imposing a pattern, the golden rectangle drawn hopefully across the Parthenon, the grid laid over a lovely face, the lines stretched across a stock chart. These are not lies. Exactly. They come from something genuinely beautiful in us. The very same hunger for order that drove every real discovery in this whole story. But they are patterns we paint on, rather than patterns we uncover. It is the difference between the shapes you see in the clouds and the shape of the cloud itself. Both are real experiences. Only one of them is really out there. And the whole, long, beautiful, stubborn human adventure of mathematics, of science, of trying to understand anything at all, is, in the end, just the slow and patient discipline of learning to tell those two apart, of loving the search for order fiercely, while staying honest enough to know when you have truly found it, and humble enough to admit when you have only wished it into being. And that, I think, is a gentle and a hopeful note to rest on, because this thread, this one single quiet number, running all the way from someone counting the beat of a poem, to a star a secret society once scratched into the sand, to the inside of a crystal that no one believed could exist. It is not finished. It is not a closed book. It is still being found, right now, in laboratories and in gardens and in places we have not yet even thought to look. So here is a good thing to fall asleep on. The world still keeps a few of its patterns folded up, quietly, patiently, waiting for someone, someday, to look in just the right place, at just the right moment, and to catch their breath. But that someone does not have to be you, and it does not have to be tonight. You have come a very long way already, all the way from a single line cut in ancient Greece, to an atom that broke the rules of the world. That is more than enough for one night. You can let it all go now. You can let the rabbits, and the sunflowers, and the stars, and the strange, impossible crystals drift gently out of focus. The patterns are not going anywhere. They have waited 4,000 years. They can wait a little longer. They'll keep